of the volleyball player. Only you are the Misty May trainer of the volleyball field. In other words, your job is to prevent the volleyball from hitting the ground and then to set up the spike for your partner. So you are not the big spiker, you're the digger. You're the one that when the ball comes over the net, you dig down, make sure it doesn't hit the ground and they score a point, and then you set the ball up for your partner. You are not necessarily the prettiest in terms of artistic style of a volleyball player, but you are critical to making sure that your team does not lose the point. You are also critical in setting the ball up for your partner to deliver the big spike. People may forget sometimes when you watch volleyball that the pretty spike was created by someone else. It was created by the one that didn't let the ball hit the ground on their side, and then that set the ball up nice and pretty for their partner for the big spike. That is what you do. You are the setup player, and you should remember that role throughout the debate. So, to begin, given that we're talking about the 1AR, I also think we should talk about the 1AC. A lot of people in debates forget that constructing the 1AC is a critical portion of winning the debate. And I begin with the premise that a 1AC should be useful later. Throughout your career, you should begin to think of the 1AC as literally setting up the 2AR, if not setting up the evidence that you want to hand the judge at the end of the debate. A 1AC doesn't just fill 8 minutes of speech time. A 1AC should be useful later on in the debate. The second affirmative rebuttal, the last speech in the debate, should be talking about a lot of pieces of evidence that were in the first affirmative constructive. And the first affirmative constructive should be designed with the second affirmative rebuttal in mind. So, a 1AC should have longer cards with better warrants in it. I have a long theory about evidence in the debate, about what purposes it serves in different speeches. And the 1AC should literally have the best evidence in the entire debate. Your evidence should be better than any negative evidence that's read. Your evidence should be better than evidence that's read in the 2AC. Your evidence should be better than evidence that's read in the 1AR. Does anyone want to give me a reason why the 1AC evidence should be the strongest in the debate? Go ahead.
Because you have like infinite time to research and set it up.
Because you have a lot of time to set it up, so you can select the best cards in the debate. Why else? Go ahead.
It sets the stage for the rest of the debate. It helps the negative find out what they need to, what they need, I don't know the word. Anyway, it helps the neg and it helps the other person on your team so that the judge knows what's going on.
I would say primarily your argument that it sets the stage for the entire debate and it helps your partner. If you've read really good evidence in the 1AC, they don't need to reread those pieces of evidence in the 2AC. They can quickly reference the evidence and says that's answered by our CITE evidence. That's answered by our Kimball evidence. Our Kimball evidence says scientists prove there is a statistical certainty that we will be hit by an asteroid. So instead of having to reread a piece of evidence or read a new piece of evidence, you've already presented that evidence and it can quickly be extended in the 2AC, the 1AR, and the 2AR. So that evidence should be very strong and serve a lot of different purposes. Second, you should anticipate the negative responses. If you read through our asteroid mapping affirmative, we literally read in the 1AC that an asteroid collision would outweigh a nuclear war. Why do we do that? Because, yes, Will is exactly right, because that's the big negative ground. We know that the negative is going to run a disadvantage, saying you cause a big war. So we anticipate that, and we say as early as the first speech in the debate, this impact is more important than anything they will say in the debate. This impact is more important than an argument they haven't even made yet, because we anticipate that they will, and we respond to it in advance. Third, practice the 1AC frequently. The 1AC should be a speech of perfection. The judge should understand it well. You should have all of the cards highlighted. You should know how to pronounce every word in the 1AC, and you should know why every piece of evidence is in the 1AC. So if you are the 1AR, a big portion of your job is to deliver that 1AC, to where when a judge hears that 1AC, they're like, wow, I really want to vote AF at the end of the speech. Not, wow, I didn't understand anything that was said. That's a horrible speech, and the negative's easily going to win. The judge should be impressed after the 1AC and really want to vote for you. Topic specifics in constructing your 1AC. And a lot of this is a rewind of some of the previous lectures. We're beginning to tie together old concepts into the speeches that we give. Number one, you should have an answer to the international counterplan in the 1AC. One of the big arguments on this topic is that the EU or China or Russia or Japan could explore space and claim those advantages. So you have to have a warrant or a reason why the U.S. is critical to do the plan in the 1AC. The asteroid mapping affirmative you have has evidence in the 1AC that says the President of the United States is crucial to doing the plan. It indicts other international organizations in it. Even if that's not a perfect piece of evidence, it's designed with a purpose in mind. We know the other team is likely to run an international counterplan. We anticipate it and we build it into the 1AC. Second, you must have an answer to the private's counterplan. You must have a reason why private corporations can't do the plan. Third, you should have a trick on politics and spending. The two most common negative arguments in debate on this topic are going to be that your plan is unpopular and that your plan costs a lot of money. You should anticipate those arguments in advance and be ready to respond to them. So for example, the asteroid mapping affirmative, first of all, it's relatively uncontroversial to map asteroids. And secondly, the plan only costs like $600 million. That may sound like a lot of money, but compared to NASA's overall budget and compared to the amount of money that we have in the overall budget, that's a pretty small amount. All right, your 1AC should be built to win. A 1AC should be dynamic, which means it should change throughout the year. You should update your 1AC to current events. If there are things going on in the world that affect your first affirmative constructive, you should add new pieces of evidence to deal with that. So for example, if astronomers halfway through the year find that an asteroid almost hit the Earth, you should put that kind of evidence in your 1AC. If you're running a space militarization affirmative and China has just done something that we need to respond to in the space arena, your 1AC should anticipate that and be updated to answer it. Second, write new advantages and write new plan texts. We live in a world of information. We live in a world where your 1AC will be posted online under various wikis. Those of you who have debated before know what I'm talking about. For those of you that are new, disclosure means that your 1AC will basically be given to the other team online. You usually will tell the other team, oh, we're running this advantage and we're running this advantage. One way to begin to take away the advantages the other team has of that disclosure is to run a new advantage. You have the right under disclosure rules to say we're going to run our old advantage and a new advantage. And so if you have new advantages for important debates, you should be able to utilize that to your advantage. The other team doesn't have the time to prepare for them, etc. You should also have new plan texts. You should have new things and new ways to solve the problem in your plan. Now, I'm not a big idea of changing a comma or a semicolon or changing the word should to ought, but you ought to have different ways in which you can do your plan for the same reason why you ought to have new advantages. At the National Debate Tournament this year, in every affirmative debate, Samford had either a new advantage or a new plan text or both frequently. And the reason why we did that was because we wanted to make the 1AC dynamic. We wanted to make it hard to answer. Mike Maffey says a slow-moving target is the easiest thing to hit. We want it to be harder to hit. So you want to be dynamic, flexible, able to move quickly so you don't get whacked by like the slow-moving turtle. The 1AC should be built to win. Write an anti-critique version. Many teams in the current era become one-trick ponies. They only run critique arguments, or they're 90% likely to go for a critique argument. So why not anticipate that? In your 1AC, you could at least have an underview on framework that identifies that debate should only be about policy. Or you can put a lot of critical preempts in there, like we shouldn't engage in utopian thought. We should try and combine incremental action with utopian thought to give you a leg up later in the debate. Don't be static against teams if you know what they're going to do. Fifth, the 2-tournament test. If you have not extended a piece of evidence that's in the 1AC in the last 2 tournaments, you should ask yourself, do we need this in the 1AC? You should probably take it out. You don't want your 1AC to get old and moldy. I've seen this happen on squads where people just stick with the same old 1AC because, well, that's what we've been reading. That's what we've been doing. Well, I've had that card in there since the beginning of the year, so why would I take it out? But you've never extended it. You've never used it before. Has anyone read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Anyone read that? Okay. What's it about? What's the book about? Don't remember. Fair enough. The book is about why you need to change in the world of business. Why you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect that it will continue to work. Even looking out at you all now, there's a big change from where you are and what you have with you than a couple of years ago. And that change is that the vast majority of you have laptops on you taking notes. In addition to that, the vast majority, if not all of you, probably have one of these in your pocket. And that's changed the world of communication. Debate should change as well. If you are sticking with an old affirmative just because it's always been there, then you're not being the most strategic, you're not being the most flexible, you're not being the most dynamic, and that's what I want to encourage you to do in the 1AC. Disad preempts. If another team is going to go for a particular kind of disad, you in the 1AC can anticipate that and put in some preemptive arguments. So for example, if NASA receives a budget increase this year, you can put that in your 1AC. And you can say that will non-unique the spending disadvantage, or that will non-unique the politics disadvantage, to not be static and to not be a fixed target. All right. That's the 1AC, but we're going to spend most of the time, actually the rest of the time today, talking about the 1AR. So I like to ask obvious questions sometimes, because I think obvious questions lead to non-obvious results. Why is the 1AR hard? Patrick?
You have 5 minutes to answer 13 minutes or even 16 if they use cross-X, right?
Okay, so you have 5 minutes to answer 13 minutes of arguments. The way debate is set up, the 1AR follows 13 consecutive minutes of arguments. So you have a lot to do in this speech, and that's right. I take a lot of my advice from this website. You don't need to write it down. You'll get it with my lecture notes. But many people would say the 1AR is the hardest speech in debate. Why? And the answer is that they get 13 minutes where you only get 5. The way debate is structurally set up, the 2NC is 8 minutes long, the 1NR is 5 minutes long, and then you get 5 minutes to answer those 13 minutes of arguments. Patrick said you may have to answer 16 minutes of arguments if they use the cross-X right. I certainly hope my second affirmative constructive is making headway for us against the second negative constructive. And I know that Lee Quinn is going to talk to you about being a 2AC. I actually think that time period of the cross-examination of the 2NC is vital for the affirmative. And I'll actually give you a tip later on in this speech about how you as the 1AR can utilize questions that your partner sets up in that cross-X to your advantage. So I would disagree with Patrick on that claim. I understand where he's going, but the affirmative needs to use that cross-examination to their advantage. So why is the 1AR hard? You can't over-explain. You can't get on your soapbox and try and be the pretty 2AR. You're the digger. You're the one that's going to get your face in the sand a little bit because you're going to be digging down for that ball and making sure it doesn't hit the ground. So you don't have the time to sit there and wax eloquent on things. You need to get your arguments out and you need to move on. Furthermore, there's a wide variety of arguments to deal with. We live in an era where the negative can pretty much do whatever it wants. A typical 1AR will frequently deal with topicality, a counterplan, at least one disadvantage, a critique, and case arguments with case turns in it. The widest variety of arguments possible may be dealt with in the 1AR. So you have to be prepared to debate the widest array of things and anticipate that you need to know how to deal with all of them. The 2AR can't make new arguments. If you mess up, that's it. That's ball game. If the other team spikes the ball over the net and you miss it, you're done. Your partner can be the best spiker in the world, but if you didn't get the ball for them in the first place, it doesn't matter. So you need to make sure you keep the debate alive for your partner. And you got to save some prep time. You got to do all of this under limited prep time constraints. I think a good rule of thumb is to make sure that your partner has at least 2 minutes of prep time for the 2AR. As you get a little older and get a little more advanced, you may even want to save more prep time for your partner. You may even want to save about 3 minutes of prep time for that 2AR. But you need to anticipate that in advance. You can't burn the entire prep clock down. I've seen teams have to give 2ARs with no prep time on the clock. And a 1AR needs to watch and manage their prep time clock. This next part is going to be divided into a couple sections. What do I have to do and what do I want to do? You have certain jobs that if you don't do them, you're going to lose the debate. So what do you have to do in the 1AR? The first thing is you have to answer any voting issues. You have to answer what Skip Coulter calls sudden victory arguments. I'll be a little more pessimistic. I'll call them sudden death arguments. That if you don't answer them, you will instantly lose the debate. So answer any voting issues. What do I mean? Topicality, theory, or anything labeled a voting issue by the other team. If you don't answer it, if you drop it, you lose. Which is why you will hear affirmative theorists say that those kinds of arguments should always go first in the 1AR to make sure you answer them. And sneaky neg teams like to hide voting issues. I watched a practice debate on Monday, and the sneaky neg team said, you ran a permutation, and that's a voting issue against you. And you want to make sure that you answer all of those sneaky negative voting issues. They're playing a game of hide and seek. They're going to hide things. If you don't answer them, you can lose the whole debate on them. Tip: a strong cross X by your partner can make voting issues look silly. Some neg teams like to rattle off a bunch of voting issues. They like to say, oh, you ran a permutation, that's a voting issue. Oh, you said international fiat was bad, that's a voting issue against you. Oh, you said that conditionality was bad, which is a voting issue back against you. And you said topicality wasn't a voting issue, which is a voting issue against you. And they'll flood the debate with 4 or 5 of these ridiculous voting issues. Well, your partner, one good thing they can do is say, like, we ran a permutation, and that's a voting issue. Why don't you just answer the permutation? Once your partner establishes that framework in the cross-examination, you and the 1AR can say, permutation, not a voting issue, cross-apply the cross-X. A lot more efficient than you having to explain the argument. The judges heard the cross-X. They know the kind of thing they're talking about. So coordinate with your partner. And you 2As out there can help your partner by delivering a good cross-examination against the 2NC. And I think one of the best things to do is to point out places on these voting issues where they're obviously not voting issues. What do you have to do? Number 2, you've got to generate some offense. You've probably heard this phrase discussed, but I want to make sure people know what I'm talking about here. Offense are arguments that your plan is a good idea. It's not just arguments that their disadvantage is false or their critique is false. Your plan has to be a good idea. You have to score some points. And the way you score points is you say, our plan is a good idea. It's not enough to merely generate defense against their arguments. You've got to have some offense in the debate. You've got to score some points. So, what do? Number 1, advantages. Your advantages to the 1AC. You've got to keep at least one of them alive. I'm going to recommend that you don't have to keep all of them alive. You can narrow them down, you can whittle them down. I think a reason to run more than one advantage on the affirmative is so you can kick them throughout the debate and get time trade-offs for you. But you gotta have at least one. Add-ons. An add-on is just an advantage you read in the 2AC. You might need an add-on advantage in the debate. Some people think that our answer to the EU counterplan that says U.S. leadership is good and stops China from invading Taiwan is not truly an answer to the counterplan, but merely an add-on. I don't really care. It's a reason to vote for the affirmative over the counterplan, so it's not a huge deal what it is, but it's offense for you. Solvency deficits to counterplans. If they have a counterplan, they're likely to go for a counterplan in the debate. You've got to have a reason why your plan is preferred above the counterplan. And one great way to do that is to say the counterplan doesn't solve as well as the affirmative plan. Last, turns to disadvantages or critiques. Reasons why those can be advantages for you. One of the tips I'm going to give for older people is to learn to straight turn something, to stick them with it, to hoist them on their own petard. Whatever language you want to use, sometimes you may want to stuff the negative team with an argument that they don't really want to keep around. And so you want to keep turns to disadvantages and critiques alive. Third, what do you have to do? You got to play defense against their arguments. You got to play at least some defense. It's not all about offense. Defense are arguments that prove your plan is not bad. So if you say there's no link to their disad, or there's no impact to their disad, then you are playing defense against their arguments. You don't want them to win 100% risk of their disad, because that would be too much burden for you to win offense on. You'd have to win 100% of your case to outweigh 100% of their disads. You don't want to drop their disads. You want to get there. You want to make some answers to their disadvantages. You want to choose which answers you want to make. And I'll give you the rubric in a second or two for the 1AR. But you want to make sure you answer any voting issues. You want to make sure you generate some offense. And you want to make sure you play defense against their arguments. That's what you have to do. Those are your basic requirements. That's preventing the ball from landing on your side of the net and setting your partner up to spike it for them. Okay. What should you do in 1AR? Now we've got the basics. Now we know, all right, I'm going to lose the debate if we do those things. Now we're going to make it to where you can win the debate and set your partner up for that nice, beautiful spike down the middle where you score your points. My acronym for the 1AR is TIME. I think this is the most time-oriented speech. And TIME means to time map, to use embedded clash, to make choices, and to work on efficiency. I firmly believe that 1AR should be attached to their timer. If you're a true 1AR, at any moment in time, you should have that timer with you in your bag. You should be in class, and someone should say, do you have your timer with you? Yes, I have my timer with me. You should be at the airport on vacation with your parents, and they should ask, do you have your timer with you? Yes, I have my timer with me. And when you are speaking, you should have that timer right there, and you should know how much time is left. You should be a master of time. You should know if someone runs across a field. That took you about 30 seconds to run across that field, because you should be so attached to the notion of time, because you will be the master of time efficiency. You will know, I only have 5 minutes to do something, and I know how long 5 minutes is, because I have my timer right here with me, and it will tell me how long 5 minutes is. Time is the key to the 1AR. If you don't leave this with very much, know time. It is a speech of time. If you were the 1AR, you should know how long things take, because you don't have much time to get things done. Time mapping, what do I mean? A time map is a guide to how long you should spend on each argument. What you do is, before the speech begins, take 15 seconds with your partner and say, how much time do you want me to spend on each issue in the debate? There's a topicality violation, there's one disadvantage, there's a counterplan, and we have 2 case advantages. How much time, O2AR, who I'm going to defer to, do you want me to spend on each issue in the debate? Your partner might say, well, let's see. There's topicality, there's a disadvantage, there's a critique, and we have 2 advantages. 5 minutes. Why don't you spend a minute on each one of those? And so what you do is, you would write down what the timer will say when you get there. So you take out your first sheet, and in the upper right corner, you write 4 minutes. If you're left-handed or you prefer it on this side for some reason, write it up here, 4 minutes. Next sheet of paper. By the time I leave that sheet of paper, I want it to say 3 minutes, because I'll have spent a minute on each of the first 2 arguments. Next sheet of paper, I'm going to write 200 in the upper right-hand corner, because by the time I leave that sheet of paper, I want the timer to say 2 minutes. When I'm giving my speech, I'm going to be paying attention to the timer. I'm going to say, oh, 2 minutes, time to go on. I'm going to quickly finish whatever argument I'm on, and I'm going to keep it moving to where I don't drop any argument in the debate, and I spend the right amount of time on it. Put important arguments top of the order. What do we want to make sure we put at the top of the order? Someone tell me. We've already talked about it. Any voting issues, I want to make sure at the top of the order. So if they had an off-case topicality violation or an off-case theory argument that was a voting issue, top of the order. That way I make sure I don't drop them. Number 1 rule, off-case theory. Topicality, A-spec, plan flaw, whatever that is, goes at the top of the order. Then put their major off-case positions, and then put your case advantages. You're the 1AR. The clock is always ticking. You should know what that clock says. You should know how much time is left in the speech. You should always be in a state where you know what that timer says, and you should be moving on to your next position. I don't know if you ever watched the show 24, but they always were talking about the clock and how much time they had. You should be focused on how much time you've got left. So off-case theory, major off-case positions, and then your case advantages. That's a pretty good order for the vast majority of 1ARs. Pragmatic advice on time mapping. You've got to watch the clock. You've got to have it there with you. It should be like a tether to your arm. You should know how much time you have left. Second, follow the time map. A lot of people will get in the habit of writing things down, and they've listened and they said, oh, I'm going to write things down on my time map, and then they don't pay any attention to it. It won't do you any good unless you follow it. Just like directions on the road, you've got to follow your directions. Third, have your partner call time. I recommend that your partner call time at 30-second intervals. So your partner should also have a timer there with them. That's the reason why we give each of you a timer. You're giving in your speech, your partner should just say 4:30. Your partner should say 4, 3:30. And that's a lot better than your partner saying, get to the disadvantage, you moron! What are you doing? Your partner can instead say 4. And if your partner has some urgency and knows you're not following your time map, they can say 3:30. And they can say 3. Now hopefully your partner won't be too annoying about that and you'll work on some signals for that. But the point is, calling time can be an effective reminder for you to keep on moving on. All right, embedded clash. This is a concept talked about by Scott Dethridge, a legendary coach for Northwestern University, whose team won 7 national debate tournaments. And he feels like embedded clash is the core concept to understanding how to deliver a 1AR. Can't give you any more credentials than saying the guy's won the national debate tournament 7 times in his directing career. Okay, embedded clash. Embedded clash means that you answer arguments without specifically identifying that you are. So, the usual rule is repeat and defeat. The 1AR is just defeat. I'm sure Skip talked to you yesterday in the 1NR that a key secret to the 1NR is to repeat their argument and then answer it. So they say non-unique, you answer it. That's fine for the 2NC and the 1NR. They have plenty of time. They have 13 minutes. You, my friends, only have 5. So you do not have time to go down, they read a piece of evidence on this, and their next card said this, and their next card said this. You instead need to come up with a system where you answer those pieces of evidence without specifically saying that you do, and that's what embedded clash is. Example. You could say, literature doesn't exclude us because the 1AC proves we're in the literature. Notice, I didn't say, they said literature checks. They said literature is key. I'll say literature doesn't exclude us. I instead just say literature doesn't exclude us. Now it's obvious from me saying that I'm answering their argument about literature. I just don't repeat that I did. Or reasonability outweighs competing interpretations because competing interpretations creates a race to the bottom. I didn't say they said reasonability is a bad standard because competing interpretations is better. I instead made an argument that anyone listening to that argument would know that I'm extending reasonability or literature. By the way, you don't need to write down that whole big chunk of arguments. I just want you to get used to listening to what a 1AR sounds like. So I might say, group the reasonability debate. Literature doesn't exclude us because the 1AC proves we're in the literature, and reasonability outweighs competing interpretations because competing interpretations creates a race to the bottom. I didn't repeat all the answers they made on reasonability. I instead grouped it and made my answers. And it was obvious because I embedded the clash what the arguments dealt with. It was obvious that those answered arguments that they made. I just didn't repeat what they said. Third concept, make choices. The 1AR is about making choices. The negative has issue selection, but the affirmative has argument selection. The negative gets to choose what issues, i.e. what disadvantages, what critique, what counterplan they go for later in the debate. They will kick arguments they don't want to go for. But what do you have? You have argument selection. Your 2AC should have made multiple answers to a disadvantage in the 2AC. You get to pick which of those arguments you go for in the 1AR. If you win that it's non-unique, you can beat the whole disadvantage. If you win there's no link, you can beat the whole disadvantage. So you don't want to choose every argument your partner made. You choose the best ones. And here's my advice on making choices. Two kinds of choices. You can extend select answers on a disadvantage, a counterplan, a critique, and you can kick advantages. Those are ways you can make choices. You don't want to extend every answer on their off-case positions. After all, they had 13 minutes. You had 5. How are you going to do that? What are you going to keep up with? You could be the fastest debater in the world, and you're not going to be 3 times as fast as they are. You've got to make some choices. And kicking advantages. If you have more than one advantage here, when I see, why don't you get rid of some of those? Why don't you say, fine, we'll give you that one. We don't even need that one to win. We'll beat you with what we do have. Selective answers. Selective answers. When you're choosing which answers to go for, the do's and don'ts list. Do. Pick the best answers. Pick the ones where you are doing very well. 2. Pick answers that they undercovered or dropped. Sometimes the negative block or the 1NR won't answer all of the 2AC arguments. Well, that's your money argument. They didn't answer this argument. Extend it. It means there's no impact to the disadvantage. They didn't answer this argument. Extend it. It means the disadvantage is non-unique. Third, pick answers your partner wants you to go for. There's an old adage that the 2AR is in charge of the affirmative ship. What that means is you should defer to your partner. If your partner says, I want you to go for this answer, don't sit there and argue with them and say, you moron, that's not going to win us the debate. Instead say, you are in charge of the affirmative ship. That's fine. I'll listen to you. I'll defer to you. You are in charge of this side of the ship. Don't pick the top answer. Lots of people get in the habit of just being like, well, we made that answer first, so I'll just extend it no matter what. Indeed, the top answer is probably where the negative team spent most of their time and energy. So the top answer may be an argument that you don't want to go for, that you don't want to spend a lot of time on. Second, pick answers based on ideology. As you grow in debate, you will begin to develop an ideology about various issues. You may think, international counterplans are so unfair. Every time you hear one, your blood may boil, you may seethe a little bit, and you may inside feel like they are cheaters. We will defeat them and I will go for theory against the international counterplan. I do not care that they made 27 reasons why international fiat is good and dropped our solvency answers to the counterplan. I will prove once and for all, I will strike a blow for justice, truth, and the American way by going for international fiat, despite the fact that they have made 37 answers in the block to this position. Don't be ideological, just be pragmatic. Another ideology that happens is, I hate those sneaky cheaters that run critiques. Oh my goodness, they ran a critique. And I'm going to prove once and for all that critiques are cheating, and I'm going to go for framework, and I do not care that they made a bunch of answers to framework. I will win it once and for all, and truth and justice will prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, the hallways after elimination rounds are filled with teams that just lost on ideology. And they're complaining. And they're like, I cannot believe these judges. These judges just will not vote for us. Oh my goodness. The world is unjust and I deserved a victory. Or maybe you should have been a little bit pragmatic and realized that you don't need to go for that ideological perspective, even if you have it. Your perspective can be, fine. International fiat's good. But we'll win the counterpoint doesn't solve. Or we'll win it's a bad idea. Even if I think that inside, I don't have to go for that. Third, do not overrule your partner. You are not the spiker. You are the setter. You are just trying to get the ball over to your partner and keep the ball alive. You are not in charge of the affirmative shift. If your partner says, go for this answer, you do not have the right to say, oh, I don't want to go for that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Instead, do what your partner wants you to do. If you're the 1A and you're the 2N, don't worry. Your turn is on the negative. Mike Matthew will talk to you about the 2N, and the 2N is in charge of the negative shift. So, when it's your turn, you can tell your 1NR you're going to go for that. And the 1NR does not have the right to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. 1AR, you don't overrule your partner. You bow to the affirmative shift. Kick advantages. The 1AR should triage advantages that are going poorly. Somebody tell me what triage means. Kick, get rid of. In hospitals, in war zones in particular, they take in patients in the triage zone. And they make decisions about who needs to be seen first and who needs to be seen later. You should triage advantages that are going poorly for you. If they make 30 answers to one advantage and 2 to your next one, why on earth are you going for the one with 30 on it? Get rid of it. Kick it. Keep it moving. Remember, you are the efficiency machine. You want to keep it moving. You don't want to ever get bogged down in quicksand. So, just get rid of something and go for your other advantage. To kick an advantage means to no longer defend that advantage. To kick an advantage. The acronym is ICE. This would make more sense to people of Mike Matthews' generation, but you can even think of ICE, ICE baby if you wish to on this advantage. A few of you still get it. So the joke hasn't lost all currency like my Ferris Bueller jokes have. ICE. Identify that you're kicking it. China advantage, we're kicking it. I've identified you, I'm not going for it. Economy advantage, we're kicking it. I always like to say we're kicking it instead of we're not going for it. I would never want to accuse you fine young ladies and gentlemen of not being the clearest in the world. But sometimes when you're going very quickly and you say you're not going for something and you swallow the word not, the judge might say, oh, they're going for it. But wait a minute. They only made like one answer on it. What are they doing? Kicking it is more clear. Concede their arguments to kick it. Economy advantage, not going for it. Extend, the economy is not critical to war, they have no offense. Third, explain why any turns are gone. Economy advantage, not going for it. Extend economy is not key to war. If there's no impact to the economy, it doesn't matter if they turn it. Moving on.
Wait,
Yes.
don't you have to address the turns?
If there's no impact to the turns, because I got rid of it, then the turns won't have any impact to them, right? If the turn has an impact different than my advantage, that's fine. Aaron.
Like, if we're going to just not go for an advantage, can we just like not say anything about it, like just, or
Not necessarily because of what Akeem said. If there are turns on that advantage, if they say, oh, you caused bad X, Y, or Z to happen, I have to go to that advantage, right? But what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of the turns by eliminating their offense. Okay? And this is something we should go over more in lab if there's confusion about it. If there's an advantage I have, and they have turns on it, like the asteroid bomb turn. Okay? Let's say I'm just going to not talk about my asteroid advantage anymore. And they say, well, we'd like to talk about it. We think asteroids are real bad and outweigh anything you could win anywhere else. And you cause an asteroid collision. However, if they say elsewhere, oh, asteroids don't have a big impact or it won't hurt the Earth, you can say, extend asteroids don't have a big impact, they won't hurt the Earth. The asteroid bomb turn doesn't have an impact now. Okay? But ask these questions back in lab. This is an important concept and an important idea. And I know Mike's going to talk about kicking disads in his negative 2NC lecture as well. And this is just the mirror image. You can kick an advantage. Efficiency is the last portion of our time analogy. The error people make in the 1AR is to assume you have to be fast instead of being efficient. 1ARs are the classic gaspers. 1ARs who are not the best in the world will be like,